He installed cameras all over our smart home, but I found a way to turn them off when my lover came over. We laughed at how obsessed he was with his gadgets, until the moment he unleashed his revenge at my company gala. Watch until the end. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. 03 a.m. The notification from the living room motion sensor lights up my phone. I didn't need to check the smart home app anymore. The pattern was all too familiar by now. Movement in the living room at this ungodly hour, followed by our front door opening, then closing quietly. Minutes later, our neighbor's front door would open and close. My wife thought I was oblivious. But you can't fool a system architect who built our smart home from the ground up. It had been happening for 3 months now. My wife, Rachel, and our neighbor, Daniel, the so-called tech genius who'd helped set up our smart home system. The same system that was now documenting their betrayal in meticulous detail. But tonight was different. Tonight, I wasn't just going to watch another log entry add to my evidence folder. Tonight, the smart home was becoming my tool of revenge. I opened my laptop and typed a few commands. The system I'd spent years perfecting was about to serve a new purpose, one I'd never imagined when I installed the first smart bulb in our home 4 years ago. Rachel had no idea that when she'd given Daniel access to our system for maintenance, I'd been monitoring every override, every deleted log, every attempt to cover their tracks. My finger hovered over the Enter key. One press would activate Protocol Sunlight, named for what it would do, expose everything. I took a deep breath and thought about how we got here, about the life we'd built, about the moment everything changed. Press. And just like that, our smart home became the instrument of my carefully orchestrated revenge. 6 months earlier, James, you're obsessing again, Rachel said, watching me adjust the positioning of our new living room camera for the 3rd time. It's not obsessing, it's optimizing, I replied, finally satisfied with the camera's field of view. There. Now we can see the entire living room and part of the kitchen from this angle. Rachel sighed, tucking her auburn hair behind her ear, a habit she'd had since college when we first met. Our house has more cameras and sensors than a government facility. Don't you think it's a bit much? I stepped back to admire my handiwork. The tiny camera blended perfectly with our modern decor, another piece in my comprehensive smart home system. It's about convenience and security, I explained, not for the first time. Imagine never having to worry about whether you locked the door or turned off the oven. Imagine perfect climate control that knows which rooms we're using. This is the future, Rach. I know. Your personal technology playground. She smiled, but I could tell she still didn't fully understand my passion. As a cybersecurity analyst specializing in EOT systems, building the perfect smart home wasn't just a hobby, it was an extension of my expertise. Every sensor, every automation was carefully selected and programmed by me. I'd spent countless weekends running cables through walls, programming custom routines, and ensuring everything worked seamlessly. Our friends called our place the spaceship because of how automated everything was. Lights that responded to our movements, blinds that adjusted based on the sun's position, a refrigerator that ordered groceries, and a security system that could detect unusual patterns. The perimeter sensors need recalibration, I said, checking my phone. They're still giving false positives when the neighbor's cat walks by. Rachel walked over and wrapped her arms around me from behind. Can the smart home genius take a break? We haven't had a proper date night in weeks. I turned around and kissed her. After 8 years of marriage, she still had that effect on me, the ability to pull me away from my projects and back to reality. You're right, let me just run one diagnostic and I'm all yours. She rolled her eyes playfully. One diagnostic. I'll go get ready. As I ran the system check, I noticed something strange. There was a brief connectivity drop in our network at 2 a.m. Probably nothing, maybe an automatic update from our ISP, but I made a mental note to look into it later. That night, over dinner at our favorite restaurant, Rachel seemed distracted. When I asked if something was wrong, she smiled and shook her head. Just work stress. The Johnson account is driving me crazy. I nodded sympathetically. Rachel was a marketing executive at a prestigious firm, and the Johnson account had been consuming her time lately, leading to late nights at the office and weekend work sessions. You've been working too hard, I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Maybe we should plan a vacation. Get away from it all. Her eyes lit up. That would be amazing. Somewhere with terrible Wi-Fi so you can't spend the whole time checking your smart home app. Hey, I'm not that bad. James, you literally interrupted our anniversary dinner last year because the living room temperature dropped 2 degrees. That indicated a potential system failure. It could have been nothing. Which it was, she laughed. I love your passion, but sometimes I wish you were as attentive to me as you are to your gadgets. I felt a pang of guilt. Had I been neglecting her? You know you're more important than any technology. I know, she said, but something in her expression made me wonder if she really believed it. A week later, the living room camera glitched. Instead of the smooth, high-definition feed I was used to, the image was pixelated and froze occasionally. I tried troubleshooting remotely from work, but nothing seemed to fix it. I need to replace the camera, I told Rachel over the phone. Or at least check the wiring, it might be a connectivity issue. Can't it wait until the weekend? She asked. I'd rather fix it now. You know I don't like leaving system errors unresolved, she sighed. Fine. But I have a late meeting, so I won't be home until after 8. No problem, I'll handle it. I left work early and stopped by an electronics store to pick up a new camera, just in case. When I got home, I immediately went to the living room to examine the faulty device. After some testing, I discovered the problem wasn't with the camera itself but with the connection. Something was causing interference in our local network. It was strange. I designed the system to be resilient to common interference. I was deep in troubleshooting mode when my phone buzzed. A text from Rachel, meeting running late. Don't wait up for dinner. Love you. I texted back a quick acknowledgement and returned to my task. By 10 p.m., I'd identified and fixed the issue, a conflicting signal from a new device one of our neighbors had installed. I made a mental note to add better isolation to our network. As I was packing up my tools, a thought occurred to me maybe I could help our neighbors set up their systems properly to avoid future conflicts. It would be a win-win. They'd get better performance, and I wouldn't have to deal with interference. The next day, I printed some flyers offering free smart home consultations and dropped them in our neighbors' mailboxes. It was partly self-serving, but I also genuinely enjoyed helping others optimize their technology. A few days later, our doorbell rang. I opened it to find a man about my age standing there holding one of my flyers. Hi, I'm Daniel from next door. I just moved in last month. Are you the smart home guy? He gestured to the flyer. James, nice to meet you. We shook hands. Daniel had a firm grip and an easy smile. He was tall with dark-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly look. I saw your flyer and thought I'd take you up on the offer. I've been having issues with my Wi-Fi setup. Sure, I'd be happy to help. Want to come in? I can show you my setup, might give you some ideas. Daniel stepped inside and his eyes widened as he took in our living room with its discreetly placed technology. Wow, this is impressive. Very clean installation. Thanks, it's been a work in progress for years. I gave him a tour of our system, explaining the various components and how they work together. Daniel asked insightful questions, showing a level of technical knowledge that surprised me. You seem to know your stuff, I commented as I showed him our server closet. I'm a software engineer specializing in EOT systems, he explained. Just started at Nexus Tech downtown. No way, I'm a cybersecurity analyst focusing on EOT vulnerabilities. Small world. We spent the next hour discussing technology, sharing ideas, and geeking out over the latest smart home innovations. It was refreshing to talk to someone who understood my passion. I should head back, Daniel said eventually, but this was great, thanks for the tips. Anytime, let me know if you need help implementing any of it. As he was leaving, Rachel arrived home from work. I introduced them and they exchanged pleasantries. Your husband has an amazing setup here, Daniel told her. You're lucky to have such a tech-savvy guy. Rachel smiled. Sometimes I think the house gets more attention than I do, but yes, he's very talented. I felt that familiar pang of guilt again. After Daniel left, Rachel turned to me. He seems nice, new neighbor. Yeah, just moved in. He's having some tech issues I offered to help with. That's nice of you, she said, then added with a smirk. Finally found someone who speaks your language. Ha ha, but yeah, he knows his stuff, works in EOT too. Well, I'm glad you've made a friend who appreciates your obsession. She kissed me on the cheek. I'm going to take a shower. Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I developed a friendship. We'd grab beers occasionally and talk tech. He even helped me implement some new features in my system, suggesting improvements I hadn't considered. Rachel seemed pleased that I had found a friend with similar interests. It's good for you to have someone to talk to about all this. I try, but we both know I zone out when you get too technical. One evening, as Rachel was heading out for yet another late meeting, she made a suggestion that, in retrospect, was the beginning of the end. Why don't you ask Daniel to help you with that new security protocol you've been struggling with? I hate seeing you so frustrated. I had been trying to implement a more sophisticated security layer that would detect and respond to potential intrusions, but I kept running into integration issues. That's not a bad idea, I admitted. He might have some insights. See, I have good ideas too, she teased. Just make sure you're done by Friday. We have dinner with my parents, remember? How could I forget? Your dad's quarterly interrogation about when we're having kids. She laughed. He means well, see you tonight. I texted Daniel and he came over that evening. We spent hours working on the security protocol, and with his help, I finally got it working correctly. This is impressive, he said, reviewing the code. Most people wouldn't go to this level of detail for a home system. I like being thorough. Plus, it's a good test case for work. He nodded. By the way, I noticed your network mapping could use some optimization. Mind if I take a look? Be my guest. Daniel connected his laptop to my system and began typing. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. You're giving me access to your main controller, he asked, sounding surprised. I trust you. Plus, I can see everything you're doing, he smiled. Most security guys I know would never do that. Most security guys haven't vetted their neighbors as thoroughly as I have, I joked. Daniel laughed. Should I be flattered or concerned that you background checked me? Both, I grinned. But seriously, it's just professional habit. I do it with everyone. Fair enough. And what did your background check reveal? Stanford Computer Science, 4 years at Google, 2 at a startup that got acquired. No criminal record. 1 speeding ticket 3 years ago, he whistled. Thorough indeed. Well, here's what I'm thinking for your network. By the time we finished, it was past midnight. The system was running better than ever, and I felt a sense of accomplishment. Thanks for the help, I said as I walked him to the door. I owe you one. Happy to help a fellow tech enthusiast. Maybe next time I can pick your brain about my security setup. Anytime. After he left, I did a final check of the system before heading to bed. Rachel was already asleep, so I quietly slipped under the covers beside her. In the darkness, I reflected on how lucky I was. A beautiful wife, a fulfilling job, a home that was a testament to my passion, and now a friend who shared my interests. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. The first sign that something was wrong came about a month later. I was reviewing the system logs, a weekly ritual to ensure everything was running smoothly, when I noticed unusual activity patterns. There were brief periods when certain cameras would go offline, then come back online minutes later. At first, I attributed it to system updates or power fluctuations. But when I cross-referenced the times with other data, a pattern emerged. These outages always occurred when Rachel was home and I wasn't. Curious, I dug deeper. The outages were too regular to be coincidental, and they affected only specific cameras, mainly in the living room and hallway. I decided to add a new layer of logging, one that would record any manual overrides or system commands, including those that might be attempting to delete logs. A week later, my suspicions were confirmed. Someone was deliberately taking certain cameras offline, then deleting the evidence from the main logs. But they didn't know about my secondary logging system. The commands were coming from a user account I had created for Rachel. But why would Rachel turn off cameras? She had never shown much interest in how the system worked. Unless she didn't want to be recorded. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I told myself there could be innocent explanations. Maybe she was having friends over and wanted privacy. Maybe she was planning a surprise for me. But a darker possibility lurked in the back of my mind. I decided to set up an alert that would notify me whenever a camera was manually disabled. I wouldn't confront Rachel yet, not until I had more information. 3 days later, the alert triggered. I was at work when my phone buzzed, informing me that the living room camera had been disabled. It was 2 p.m. Rachel should have been at work too. I checked her location through our shared account. Her phone showed she was at home. I called her office and asked for her, maintaining a casual tone. I'm sorry, Mr. Reynolds, but Rachel left early today. She said she wasn't feeling well. I thanked the receptionist and hung up. My heart was racing. Rachel hadn't mentioned feeling ill. Why would she lie? I decided to leave work early myself. As I drove home, I tried to calm my rising panic. There had to be a reasonable explanation. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed another car parked nearby, a black Tesla, Daniel's car. My blood ran cold. Instead of going in through the front door, I used the side entrance that led directly to my home office. I entered silently, my security credentials overriding any attempt to log my entry into the system. From my office, I could access all the cameras that were still online. Most had been disabled, but there was one Rachel didn't know about, a backup camera in the hallway that I'd installed during a system update but never added to the main interface. I pulled up the feed, and there they were. Rachel and Daniel emerging from our bedroom, adjusting their clothes. They were laughing about something. Daniel pulled her close and kissed her, not a friendly peck, but a passionate embrace that left no doubt about what they had been doing. I felt physically ill, my wife and my friend, in our home, in our bed. I watched as they moved to the kitchen. Rachel poured 2 glasses of wine, the expensive bottle I'd been saving for our anniversary. "To us," Daniel said, raising his glass. "To us," Rachel echoed, "and to your brilliant idea of turning off his precious cameras, he'll never know." Daniel smirked. The irony of a cybersecurity expert being so easily deceived, he practically handed me the keys to his castle. "You mean our castle," Rachel corrected him. "He's so obsessed with his technology that he doesn't even notice what's happening right under his nose." "His loss, my gain." Daniel pulled her close again. "When are you going to tell him?" Rachel sighed. "Soon, I'm just waiting for the right time. It's complicated. We've been together for so long." "But you're not happy with him." "I haven't been happy for years. He cares more about his gadgets than he does about me. Do you know how long it's been since we had a real conversation that didn't involve him explaining some new feature he'd added to the house?" Her words cut deep. Had I really been that negligent? "Well, I appreciate both your mind and your body," Daniel said, his hands wandering in a way that made me want to punch through the screen. You certainly proved that upstairs," Rachel purred. "But he'll be home in a few hours, you should go." "When can I see you again?" "Tomorrow, he has that conference call that always runs late. It's a date. Don't forget to turn the cameras back on before he gets home." As if I would forget, he'd notice that immediately. They kissed again, and then Daniel left. Rachel reactivated the cameras, erased the logs, and went about straightening up the house as if nothing had happened. I sat in my office, stunned, my world collapsing around me. 8 years of marriage destroyed. A friendship revealed as a lie. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to rage and scream and demand explanations. But another part, the analytical, strategic part that made me good at my job, held me back. They thought they had been, I wouldn't just confront them. I would make them pay, using the very technology they thought they had outsmarted. But first, I needed to gather more evidence and formulate a plan. For the next 3 months, I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the same James, devoted husband, dedicated professional, enthusiastic tech hobbyist. I acted normally around Rachel, giving no indication that I knew about her betrayal. But beneath that facade, I was meticulously documenting every instance of their affair and developing my revenge. I created a shadow system that Rachel and Daniel couldn't detect, a parallel smart home infrastructure that recorded everything without appearing in the main logs. I installed additional hidden cameras and microphones throughout the house. I set up programs to automatically record and save their conversations, their trysts, their plotting. The evidence I gathered was devastating. Their affair had been going on for nearly 6 months, starting shortly after Daniel moved in. What I had interpreted as professional interest in my smart home system had actually been reconnaissance, learning how it worked so they could circumvent it. Rachel's late meetings were often lies. The Johnson account she claimed was causing so much stress. She'd passed it to a colleague months ago. Their pillow talk revealed even more painful truths. They discussed their future together, where they might live after Rachel left me, whether they wanted children. They laughed about how oblivious I was, how focused on my stupid gadgets that I couldn't see what was happening in my own marriage. They even speculated about whether I was on the autism spectrum, given my obsessive interest in technology and apparent inability to read Rachel's emotional needs. "Maybe I should have tried harder," Rachel said once, in a rare moment of guilt. "But I was so lonely, Daniel. It's like living with a robot." "Don't blame yourself," Daniel had replied. "Some people just aren't capable of real emotional connection. You deserve better." Each new revelation was a knife in my heart, but I channeled my pain into perfecting my plan. I would expose them so thoroughly, so publicly, that they would never recover. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Rachel mentioned that her company was hosting a product launch event where all employees were encouraged to bring their spouses. It was a major event with industry professionals and media in attendance. "You'll come, right?" she asked over dinner. "I know these corporate events aren't your thing, but it's important for my career." "Of course," I said, smiling as if I didn't know she had invited Daniel as her +1 in text messages just hours earlier. "I'd love to support you." "Great, it's black tie, so you'll need to wear your tuxedo." "No problem. I want everything to be perfect for your big night." She looked momentarily guilty, but quickly covered it with a smile. "Thanks, James, that means a lot." The event was 2 weeks away, perfect timing for what I had in mind. I spent those 2 weeks finalizing my preparations. Every night, after Rachel fell asleep, I worked on Protocol Sunlight, my plan to expose their betrayal in the most devastating way possible. I compiled video clips, text messages, and audio recordings into a damning presentation. I gained access to the venue's AV system through a contact in their IT department, claiming I wanted to prepare a surprise for my wife's product launch. The night before the event, Rachel received a text from Daniel. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Soon we won't have to hide anymore." She replied, "Just a little longer. After this event, I'll tell him everything." Little did they know I had planned the perfect way to preempt their announcement. The night of the event arrived. Rachel looked stunning in a black gown, her hair and makeup professionally done. I wore my tuxedo and played the part of the proud, supportive husband. "You look beautiful," I told her, and I meant it. Despite everything, a part of me still loved the woman I thought she had been. "You clean up pretty nicely yourself," she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We arrived at the venue, an elegant hotel ballroom decorated for the occasion. Rachel immediately began networking, introducing me to colleagues and clients. I smiled and made small talk, all while watching the clock. Daniel arrived 30 minutes later. He nodded coolly at me across the room but kept his distance, playing the role of the casual acquaintance rather than the close friend he had pretended to be. I saw him and Rachel exchange glances throughout the evening, subtle looks that I would never have noticed had I not been looking for them. The formal program began with speeches from company executives. Rachel's boss announced the successful launch of their new marketing campaign, praising her team's efforts. Rachel beamed with pride. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. "And now," the CEO said, "we have a special presentation from one of our team members' spouses. James Reynolds has prepared something to celebrate his wife Rachel's achievements." Rachel looked at me in surprise. I hadn't mentioned any presentation. I walked to the stage, confidence in every step. As I took the microphone, I caught Daniel's confused expression. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm James Reynolds, Rachel's husband of 8 years." A polite applause rippled through the audience. "I'm not one for public speaking, but tonight is special. Tonight I want to share with you all just how proud I am of Rachel's accomplishments." I nodded to the AV technician, who pressed a button. The large screen behind me lit up, showing what appeared to be a professional montage of Rachel's career highlights. "Rachel has always been impressive," I continued. "Her creativity, her determination, her ability to juggle multiple responsibilities." The montage shifted, now showing footage of Rachel and Daniel entering our house together, their embraces in our living room, their kisses in our kitchen. A gasp went through the crowd. Rachel's face drained of color. For those who don't recognize him, that's Daniel Weber, our neighbor and apparently my wife's lover. The footage continued, now accompanied by audio. Their voices filled the ballroom. "He'll never know. He's so obsessed with his technology. His loss, my gain. I haven't been happy for years." I stood calmly on stage as chaos erupted in the audience. Rachel's colleagues were staring in shock. Her boss looked mortified. Daniel was frozen in place, his face ashen. "But wait," I said, raising my hand for silence. "There's more." The screen now showed text messages between them, planning their future, mocking me, strategizing how Rachel would leave me after securing a promotion she was expecting. "I particularly enjoy this exchange from last week," I said, pointing to the screen where their messages were displayed for all to see. "Daniel, does he suspect anything?" "Rachel, not a chance. He thinks I'm working late on the Johnson account. I actually passed that to Melissa months ago." Daniel, we should celebrate your promotion when you get it. Maybe that trip to Bali we talked about. Rachel, perfect. I'll ask for the divorce right after. New job, new life, new man. Rachel had stumbled to her feet and was now rushing toward the stage. James, stop this immediately, I ignored her, and here's my personal favorite. From just 2 days ago. A new clip played Rachel and Daniel in our bedroom, the hidden camera capturing their most intimate betrayal in unforgiving clarity. The audience was in an uproar now. Some people were leaving, others were recording on their phones. Rachel's boss was signaling frantically to the AV team to cut the feed, but my access was locked in. Rachel had reached the stage now, her face contorted with rage and humiliation. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed, grabbing my arm. I calmly removed her hand. "Just showing everyone the real you, Rachel, the one who's been sleeping with our neighbor for months while lying to my face." Daniel had finally unfrozen and was pushing through the crowd, either to escape or to reach us. I didn't care which. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone, "I apologize for the disruption to your evening. I just wanted to ensure that everyone knows exactly who Rachel Reynolds is before she receives that promotion she's been expecting." I turned to Rachel, whose eyes were filled with tears of rage and humiliation. "By the way, I've taken the liberty of sending this presentation to your parents, your friends, and the executive board of your company. Oh, and it's currently streaming on our neighborhood's community page. I'm sure Daniel's new employers will find it particularly interesting." With that, I handed the microphone to a stunned staff member, straightened my bow tie, and walked off the stage. The aftermath was exactly what I had anticipated. Rachel was fired the next day for conduct unbecoming a company representative. Daniel, who had been in a probationary period at his new job, was let go after the video circulated to his workplace. Rachel's reputation in her industry was destroyed. No company wanted to hire someone who had become infamous for workplace infidelity and deception. Daniel, whose promising career in tech had been built on trust and integrity, found himself blacklisted from major companies after my anonymous tips about how he had used his position to compromise a private home security system. As for our marriage, there was no salvaging it, nor did I want to. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Rachel's infidelity and the public nature of the evidence left her with little leverage. I was awarded our home and most of our assets. The last time I saw Rachel, she was moving the last of her belongings out of our house. Her once confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a defeated shell of her former self. "Was it worth it?" I asked as she prepared to leave, throwing away 8 years for him. She looked at me with hollow eyes. "You didn't have to destroy us so completely, you could have just asked for a divorce. Like you were planning to do after your promotion, after using me for years. We weren't always unhappy, James. There was a time when I loved you more than anything. Save it, Rachel. I heard everything you said about me, how I was emotionally unavailable, how I cared more about my gadgets than you." She shook her head sadly. "And your response was to prove me right. To use your precious technology to annihilate me instead of trying to understand why I strayed." Her words hit harder than I expected. Had I contributed to the breakdown of our marriage? Perhaps, but nothing justified what they had done. "Goodbye, Rachel," I said, turning away. "I hope he was worth it." She didn't respond, just walked out of our home for the last time. As for Daniel, he moved out of the neighborhood within weeks. I heard through mutual connections that he had been forced to relocate to another state to find work, his reputation tarnished beyond repair in our local tech community. In the end, my revenge was complete. I had used their arrogance against them, turning the technology they thought they had outsmarted into the instrument of their downfall. Was I happy? No, the victory felt hollow. 8 years of marriage ended in betrayal and vindictiveness, a friendship revealed as manipulation and deceit, but I had preserved my dignity and shown them both that I wasn't the oblivious fool they had taken me for. As I sat alone in my perfectly automated home, surrounded by the technology that had both failed to save my marriage and enabled my revenge, I realized something important. A smart home couldn't create happiness. It couldn't replace genuine human connection. Maybe Rachel had been right about one thing: I had invested too much in technology and not enough in our relationship. It was a painful lesson, but one I wouldn't forget. I decided to sell the house. Too many memories, too much pain embedded in its walls. I would start fresh somewhere new. But first, I had one last thing to do. I opened my laptop and accessed the system one final time. Every recording, every piece of evidence I had gathered was still there, safely backed up on multiple servers. With a few keystrokes, I could delete it all, erase the digital record of our collapse. Instead, I set up an automated program. If either Rachel or Daniel ever tried to contact me again, to threaten me, to demand I remove the evidence from wherever it had spread online, the program would automatically release everything I hadn't yet made public. It was insurance, yes, but it was also closure. I closed my laptop and looked around at the home we had built together, now just an empty shell filled with smart devices but devoid of the happiness it was meant to contain. Tomorrow, I would call a realtor. Tonight, I would sleep in a hotel. As I walked out the door, I issued one final command to the system: protocol sunlight complete, initiate shutdown. One by one, the lights went out. The cameras powered down. The sensors stopped their constant monitoring. For the first time in years, the house was just a house. Not a technological marvel, not a showcase of innovation, not the site of betrayal and revenge. Just a house, sitting silent and dark, waiting for a new beginning. Just like me. Epilogue: 1 year later, I live in a modest apartment in a different city. My new place has minimal automation, just enough for convenience, not obsession. I've started seeing a therapist, working through the pain and learning from my mistakes. I'm trying to balance my passion for technology with more human connections. Sometimes I wonder about Rachel and Daniel. Last I heard, they weren't together anymore. My revenge had driven a wedge between them, each blaming the other for their downfall. Rachel occasionally tries to contact me. Her emails go unanswered, her calls blocked. The automated system I set up reminds her each time what will happen if she persists. As for me, I'm slowly healing. Dating again cautiously, being more present, more attentive. My new girlfriend knows my story. She understands my trust issues, my occasional need to verify things she tells me. She's patient with my healing process. She also appreciates that my current home doesn't watch her every move. Just a simple security system, nothing more. I've learned that true security doesn't come from cameras and sensors and automated protocols. It comes from building relationships on honesty and respect. It comes from being present in those relationships, not hiding behind screens and devices. And sometimes it comes from knowing when to let go of the past, which I'm finally learning to do. They say the best revenge is living well. I'm not there yet, but I'm working on it. One day at a time. One real human connection at a time, and without a single hidden camera in sight.